Hello, travelers and dreamers. Mira said into the speaking shell, which carried her words to anyone tuned to the caravan's frequency. If you can hear me, then somewhere a compass needle just shivered. That means a path is opening and stories are footsteps. Walk with us. She clipped the shell to her belt and unrolled a vellum map. It was blank except for a faint lattice of silver threads that pulsed to a rhythm only she seemed to hear. The threads were not ink but tone, a cartography of hums. Her mentor had called it resonance mapping, Mira called it listening. The caravan swayed over the blue grasses of the boundary plain. Sunlight caught on the axles like sparks. Beside her, a boy in a soot-stained coat tightened a brass valve on a tiny steam kite. If your map starts singing again, warn me, Jack said. The last time it sang, the ground tilted like a book on a shelf. Between them dozed a fox with a tail of pale fire. Lumen's fur was made of star sheen, soft as thought, bright as a promise. He slept with his head on Jax's boot and dreamed in constellations. Each breath rearranged a faint pattern of lights along his flank. The map hummed, a low chord first, then a thin, trembling note that set Mira's teeth on edge. She pressed a fingertip to the vellum. There, she whispered, a path waking up, the plain smoothed into a mirror of wind. Ahead, storm pillars turned in slow, dignified spirals, as if the sky itself were threading a needle. On the horizon, a whale of sunlit vapor breached, vast and gentle, its eye like a lantern behind mist. Sky whale, Mira thought, breath-catching. She had grown up on guild sketches and hand-me-down ballads. Now the living atlas turned its page and offered her a chapter. Jax, she said, skyward. He had already unfurled the steam kite. We ride the pressure waves, he grinned, or we wait like respectable people and live ordinary lives. Respectable is a daydream, Mira said, and the caravan left the ground. Up close, the sky whale moved slowly enough to seem like a continent adrift. Its barnacles were wind chimes, its call a thrumming so deep Mira felt her heartbeat take instruction from it. Lumen woke, stretched, and leapt to the whale's back without fear. Starlight paws met vapor flesh, both accepted the other. The whale carried them toward a stack of clouds shaped like a cathedral. As the whale sang, silver threads blossomed on Mira's map, outlining corridors of pressure and pockets of clear air. At the cathedral's peak there was an opening. The whale angled its bulk and nudged them through. Inside was a space of amber light and quiet wind. In the center hung a bell, not metal but glass, grown like a stalactite from the roof of the cloud. It did not rain, it breathed. Each inhalation revealed words suspended within the glass like seeds in honey. The heart note, Jax whispered. I thought that was a legend. Mira stepped closer. The map hummed more urgently. It's waking. As if hearing her, the bell took a deeper breath and exhaled a chord that unfurled across the wilds. The chord carried intent. It brushed the surface of the glass ocean far below and rippled it into a sheet of living notation. It passed through the clockwork canopy where copper-leaved trees ticked the hours for birds made of music. It echoed through the mask market, slipped beneath doorways, and rattled shelves of secrets. Everywhere it went, something stirred. A fissure opened along the bell's side. Not a crack of breaking, but a door. Within, a small shape pulsed, a seed of sound, faceted like a gem. Lumen's tail brightened. He stepped forward and sat very still, as if before a newborn star. The seed blinked, a note with eyes, and looked at Mira. In her mind, a clear voice said, "Find my siblings." 3 notes make the chord. Without it, this world forgets itself. Where are they? Mira asked aloud. The seed blinked again, showing her 3 images. A river that flowed uphill into a cave whose stalactites were icicles of sunlight. A city wearing thousands of faces, none repeated. And an island drifting on the glass ocean where the tide was made of memories. Jax exhaled. Easy. Impossible. Impossible and impossible. Mira smiled. So, the usual. She cupped her hands and the seed floated into them, weightless but humming. The bell dimmed, its breath spent. The whale turned as if satisfied, carrying them out of the cathedral and setting them gently on the boundary plain. They made camp in the lee of a singing dune. Sparks leapt from Lumen's tail to the tinder, kindling a quiet fire. Jax assembled a listening device from cogs and shell pieces. Mira laid the seed in a bowl and traced the 3 images onto parchment. We'll need a route to the river cave first, she said. Water remembers. If one note sleeps there, the others will sense when we wake it. More whales? Jax asked. Too slow for the plane, Mira said, ears pricked. Do you hear that? Across the dark, a chorus of tiny bells drifted near. Fireflies appeared. No, not fireflies. Little owls with glassy eyes and wings like paper lanterns. Each carried a bell on a ribbon, the clappers made of seeds. The first owl landed on Jax's shoulder and bowed. We are the notaries, it said in a voice like a gentle glass tap. We witnessed the heart note wake. By ancient charter, we offer escort. Mira grinned. Then lead us. They followed the notaries through a night that was mostly stars and a little wind. By dawn, the blue grasses gave way to a bronze forest. The clockwork canopy ticked politely overhead. Every leaf turned to show its different hour. When the wind gusted, the canopy chimed noon or midnight, depending on which way you walked. The river ran through the forest like a polished chain. It flowed uphill, as promised, toward a cave whose mouth panted out cool light. Before we go in, Jax said, a note on safety. He produced a tiny umbrella with gears along its rim. In caves of sunlight, we may encounter photophages. They nibble shadows off boots. Mira raised an eyebrow. And the umbrella is for dignity, he said, opening it. Lumen chuckled in his fox way. They entered. Inside, stalactites dripped beams of soft day. The river glided along the ceiling, its surface a mirror to the floor below. Fish swam in it upside down, leaving ripples of brightness. The map hummed to a new key. Mira followed, past walls that held fossilized dawns, past niches where moths warmed themselves on stored summers. At the cave's heart lay a pool in which nothing lay except a single feather. It was not from any bird Mira knew. Its vein was a staff, its barbs tiny notes. When a breeze moved, the feather composed a melody. The second sibling, Mira breathed. The pool's surface mountained up, and from its apex rose a creature like a serpent made of refracted sunrise. It wore a crown of currents. 2 gentle whiskers trailed from its snout, combing the air for questions. I guard the remembering spring, it said. Why do you come? Mira showed the seed. The world is forgetting its song. Said the guardian. Then you must take the feather. But it weighs much more than it looks. Jax reached in and lifted it easily. The guardian's mouth curved in a smile. Not the feather, it said. The responsibility. Mira bowed. We'll carry both. How do we wake it? You don't, said the guardian. You invite it. Lumen stepped to the pool's edge. His tail brightened, not with heat but with attention. He curled around the feather and hummed the chord the bell had breathed. The pool shivered. The feather stirred, shook off the dust of silence, and opened like a wing. In Mira's mind, a second voice joined the first, 2 notes seeking a third. The seed bobbed, delighted. Somewhere far off, a city of masks heard a faint harmony and turned its head, as if it had a face beneath all its faces. They thanked the guardian, who dipped back into the spring and coiled in the echo of their gratitude. As they left, the cave sighed and the upside-down river laughed softly in bubbles. Next stop, Jack said, closing the umbrella with a flourish, a city that never repeats itself. Which means, Mira said, rolling up the map as its silver threads began to form a maze, we will have to be more ourselves than ever. Lumen flicked his tail. The notaries chimed approval, and the wilds, eavesdropping, hummed them onward. The mask market did not appear so much as choose to be noticed. One moment the horizon was sensible, the next, stalls unfurled from alleyways that had not existed, awnings blossomed like paper moons, and the air tasted faintly of new names. A woman with a fan of oyster shells greeted them at the gate. "Welcome to Facet," she said. "Please take a mask. You'll need it to bargain, but it will also bargain for you." "Do we have to wear them?" Jax asked, eyeing a shelf of choices. "Scholar, sailor, stranger, candle." "Only if you want to be well understood," the woman replied. "Here, traveler." She offered Mira a mask braided of reed and rain. Map listeners usually choose weather. It hears what changes. Mira lifted it. The inside smelled like sweet earth after thunder. For Jax, she picked one that looked like a pocket watch's face. Lumen received a tiny mask shaped from a sliver of comet. He wore it on one ear and looked ridiculous, which pleased him. The market rushed them into its tide. Stalls sold slivers of sunrise, folded to fit in a locket. A man hammered doubts into nails for builders too bold for gravity. A pair of siblings braided lullabies that would not work on babies, only on old storms. "We're looking for a note," Mira told a vendor who was teaching birds to read their own shadows. "A sibling to this one." She showed the seed, which peeked shyly. The vendor's mask tilted. Notes do not like to be found. But they like to be followed when they feel followed for the right reasons. "Try the house of unfinished songs." He pointed down an alley where the cobblestones arranged themselves into staffs and treble clefs as they walked. Inside the house, silence labored like a patient. Rooms contained hummingbird chords pinned gently under glass, a sea shanty missing its storm, a lullaby that couldn't sleep. At the far end, a chamber built all of echoes. Lumen's tail light rippled, the feather hummed, the seed trembled with the anticipation of a reunion and the fear of it. A masked curator approached, robes trailing like a ledger's long totals. "What you seek has been kept safe, but safety is not where songs grow brave." He turned a crank on a wall box. Panels slid aside to reveal a small sphere of cork and brass, with a crack around its equator. Mira leaned in. Inside the sphere was a tiny theater, velvet curtain, miniature stage, and on the stage stood a single note, dressed in traveling clothes. It saw them and bowed. "Third sibling?" Mira asked, hopeful. The note shook its head. "I am a guide. The third sleeps where names are washed and returned. You will need a face to find a face." The curator clapped softly. "The river of names," he said. "It runs beneath the city, replacing what has been worn too smooth by use." They descended through a staircase that was also a ladder that was also a promise to be careful. The river moved like a procession of mirrors, each carrying a word. People leaned over to rinse their masks, emerging with slightly altered expressions, the same, but not the same. On the bank, an old woman who wore no mask at all threaded beads onto a cord. Each bead was a name spoken aloud, and when she finished the cord shivered, shortened, and matched the wearer exactly. "You're looking for a sleeping thing," she said without looking up. "Everything here pretends to be awake. That's how you'll know it." Mira scanned the crowd. Jax adjusted his watch face mask. Lumen sniffed the river and sneezed stardust. The seed floated above Mira's palm, quivering like a compass needle. Then she saw it. A boy selling paper birds that did not fly. His smile was flawless, his eyes were still. He called out in a voice pitched perfectly to the market. "Birds that remember how to be sky." But when one fluttered to the river, it did not struggle, it collapsed into silence, as if relieved. Mira approached and bowed. "Your birds are beautiful." "They are," he agreed. "May I buy one that doesn't want to be sold?" His eyes flickered, first surprise, then a small, tired hope. He pocketed his sales voice and used his real one, which sounded like a plucked strain. "Follow me." He led them beneath a bridge into a room made of shadows stitched together with thin lines of light. The birds here were unfinished, all angles and intent. On a pedestal lay a folded scrap of night with a note sleeping in it. "We hid it from the market," the boy said. "Because in Facet, everything can be bought if you learn the right price, and there are things that should only be given." Mira knelt. "Will you give it to us?" The boy's smile became true. "Not to you, to the world that needs it. But you can carry it." He lifted the scrap of night. The note inside opened its eyes and looked a question at Lumen. The fox blinked back, then hummed. The note yawned, stretched, and leapt into the feather's melody, braiding itself between the first two siblings with the eagerness of a child joining older brothers in a game. The chord formed. It was not loud. It was inevitable. Above them, the market paused. Stalls stopped bargaining with shoppers and bargained with themselves, which is always more honest. The river of names slowed, considering. The city inhaled with both lungs and all its borrowed faces, and for a moment Facet looked like a person who had just remembered their childhood. But the silence that had been spreading across the wilds, hearing the chord gather, moved faster. It was not absence of sound but lack of listening, the exhaustion of a world that had overheard too much and begun to close its ears. The silence arrived at the market as a wind that did not ruffle anything, it simply erased the space wind normally used. Stalls dimmed, voices lost their verbs. Someone said, we, and could not find the rest. Jax took Mira's hand. "We need higher ground, and the glass ocean. If the cord is to be carried, the ocean will carry it." The boy nodded and handed Mira a last paper bird. For luck, they rode the stair promise up, masks in their hands rather than on their faces. At the gate, the oyster shell woman rang a bell that did not make a sound but did make courage. The notaries rejoined them, bells bright. Lumen's tail drew a path of light toward the coast. There, beyond dunes that whispered recipes for briny bread, stretched the glass ocean. At sunset it sang to itself, 100 million notes of wave, each a memory sliding into another. They found a boat that was a question with a keel and launched upon the answer that followed. Night fell like a curtain revealing stars. In their light, the cord braided itself tighter. The seed, the feather, and the rescued note practiced being a single intention. The silence came too, riding on the backs of unspoken things. It touched the boat's wake and unmade it. It palmed the stars and left smudges where they had been. Mira stood at the bow and lifted the map. Its threads flickered. "Don't stop listening," she told it. Even to the quiet, the map hummed, a brave, uncertain sound. Lumen stepped onto the prow and raised his tail. Jax turned the brass crank that tightened every seam of the boat into resolve. "Hello again, travelers and dreamers," Mira said, speaking into the sea. If you're still with us, you know this isn't a story about victory. It's a story about fidelity. The boat sailed into the middle of the ocean, where the water turned from glass to something that remembered being glass. Underneath, miles deep, something luminous stirred. At dawn, mist rose in curtains torn by a gentle wind. Through the gaps Mira saw an island floating like an afterthought. It was made of stacked shells and bone-white beaches and trees whose leaves were translucent, showing the veins like calligraphy. The notaries chimed, the Isle of Keepers. They anchored in a bay so still the boat felt embarrassed. A path of stepping stones led ashore. The stones sang soft syllables when stepped on, greetings in languages both spoken and long gone. Lumen's pause rang in a bright, childlike meter. The keepers met them, tall, robed figures with faces of polished driftwood. Where a mouth should be, each had a small window looking out on a different memory of the sea. "You bring the cord," said the first keeper. "We bring the question. The world is forgetting its song," Mira said. "How do we remind it?" "Songs are not reminders," said the second keeper. "They are invitations. You must play the chord where everything listens at once." "Where is that?" Jax asked. The third keeper opened their robe to reveal a weathered mirror, and in it the glass ocean shivered, and beneath it the shape Mira had seen move. A city asleep, built of currents and coral, streets spelled in the language of tides. "Below," the keeper said, "the city of Pelagrian. It keeps the world's first listening." They dove. Lumen led with a lantern born from his tail. The water did not press, it held, as if the ocean was a library that had decided to let them read. Fish with letters for scales swam by in sentence shoals. A manta ray wore constellations on its back, as if bearing stories to the deep. They arrived at Pelagrian's gate, which was not closed, only uncertain. The cord in Mira's hands pulsed. The gate recognized the rhythm and swung inward. Inside, streets coiled like nautilus shells. Buildings breathed like anemones. In the great square stood a platform studded with shells of listening creatures. Whale earbones, otter whisker rooms, chambers that had once heard rain and remembered every drop. Above the platform, the water trembled as if preparing to weep with relief. Mira placed the seed, the feather, and the night note on 3 pedestals. Lumen bowed. Jax wound a mechanism that existed solely to say ready. "Hello, travelers and dreamers," Mira whispered, one last time, to anyone anywhere who might be listening, which is to say, to everyone and everything. "We're going to play what you already know." They did not strike the chord so much as release it. It rose like breath, leaving a held note in a song at last sung. It spiraled up through Pelagrian, across the ocean, into the sky, over the clockwork canopy, which reset itself not to noon or midnight but to now, and into facet, where masks went briefly transparent and people saw each other's faces and, for a heartbeat, their own. The silence arrived too, trying to be bigger than the moment. But it is the nature of listening to include silence rather than exclude it. The chord made a space broad enough for silence to rest without erasing, and the silence, finally given a seat, sighed and became quiet rather than absence. The notary's bells rang. The sky whales breached, their calls stitched with the chord. The heart note in its cloud cathedral sighed with satisfaction. Across the wilds, wind remembered lyrics. Rivers rehearsed. The market at Facet haggled joyfully with the day. Mira exhaled. Jax leaned into the certainty of a thing well risked. Lumen's tail dimmed to a friendly ember. "Will it last?" Jax asked. "For a while," Mira said. "Then someone else will need to listen. That's how worlds stay awake." They rose back to the boat. The keepers bowed. The Isle of Keepers drifted toward the horizon like a ship with no need of sails. On deck, Mira unrolled her map. The silver threads no longer formed routes, they formed relationships. Not paths, but promises. She traced one from the glass ocean to the clockwork canopy and smiled. "There's always more," she said. Jax raised the steam kite and caught a wind that had been waiting for them since the first time anyone asked what was beyond the next hill. Lumen yawned, curled up, and fell asleep, dreaming of fox-shaped constellations leaping from story to story. "Hello, travelers and dreamers," Mira said softly into the speaking shell, knowing the world would remember. "Until our next path."